This is Total Television. I'm Brian Dolby and I'm reporting from the FTTH Council meeting in Milan, where I'm delighted to be speaking to Carlota Perez, who has just given the keynote address. Carlota, tell us about the main themes of what you've been talking about this morning.
Well, what I was mainly trying to do was to locate the present moment in history. I work about technological revolutions, and of course the whole digital revolution is what we're going through now. And I have studied the 5 revolutions that have happened since the industrial one at the end of the 18th century. And I have noticed something very important, which is that midway along the diffusion of each of these revolutions, there is a huge financial crash. And the first half, the half that goes before the financial crash and the bubble and all that, what you get is a very vast experiment of trying out all the new technologies, forcing the new ideas, the whole market, choosing the winners. You have the problem of the infrastructures, of which, of course, the internet access and all this is one, which is that they need a lot of investment up front, and they don't get the revenues until much later, when the whole network is there and when you actually get services put on top of what you do. And then, so that in fact, if there weren't any bubbles, it would be very difficult to set up an infrastructure. What you get with the bubble is that lots of people will put money into this thing, even though it's not getting profits, because they can get capital gains. Because in the stock market, you know, the prices go up and then they get these gains. Eventually, when the bubble collapses, of course, lots of people lose a lot of money, but the infrastructure is in place. And that's what happened this time, and it also happened, I mean, there are many companies, Amazon and the rest, that are now very profitable, but were not profitable then when their prices were going up. So bubbles do have this role. But once they're finished, that's it. And in fact, the bubble divides a pendular movement in the history of market economies, where the first half is like that, as I just told you, very much finance-led. And the second half is more led by production, is more stable, is more socially friendly, say, because in fact the first half is very much about income polarization and all the rest. And there is much more government intervention. Normally there is finance leading the game and the new entrepreneurs and all that in the first half, and production companies with expansion plans and really more with government guiding, helping, doing the math. So I was first of all trying to say, okay, we are now at this point where if you look backward, you're not going to get good ideas for the future, because the future is not going to be like the recent past. The future will be different. Whether it's very good or very bad is going to depend on us, because now it's the political forces, it's the strategic moves of business, it's what society will do, what will determine what can happen. And in fact, we have the possibility, as every other time before, of having a golden age. There was the early, when the British leap came after Canal Mania, the Victorian boom came after railway panic, the Belle Epoque and the progressive era in the USA came after the crashes of the 90s. After 1929, we had, of course, 13 years of recession and then a big war. But after that, we had the golden age, the post-war golden age. And we now have the possibility, in my view, of having a global, sustainable golden age. Knowledge society and so on, but it's going to be green, because that is the real potential. What you have is a combination of information technologies, green growth, because it's not about zero growth, it's about growing in a green way, so that we can actually incorporate the millions of people that are coming into the market economies now through the emerging countries. So, because actually, if you look at it, it's impossible for all those people to have the American way of life. The consumerist style that uses so much energy and so much materials, it is actually, we would need 7 planets, and we don't have them. So we either change our patterns of consumption to a much more, first of all, less energy, but especially more services, more creativity, more social relations, you know, the redefinition of the quality of life. In fact, each time there has been a redefinition. With each technological revolution, the second half has meant a completely different lifestyle diffusing. Victorian living was an urban lifestyle that was very different from the aristocrats, the country living. It was two different things, but industry was serving the urban, new way of living that everybody copied after that all over Europe and everywhere. So then the Belle Epoque was a cosmopolitan lifestyle, which, because it was the first globalization, incorporated many things from everywhere. It had to do with being cosmopolitan, precisely, travel and all these things. Of course, it didn't go very far down. That was a style that stayed, that never was able to incorporate the masses. But the next one, the global golden age, was about incorporating the workers into middle-income consumption. And that was done because the automobile, which was at the core of the mass production revolution, made it possible to create suburbia. Suburban living was an invention of the mass production model, because instead of having trains that had stops and therefore only the land around them could be used, and people had to be crowded in cities in order to be able to get to work, what happened was that with cheap land, you could have cheap houses with mass production, and you could fill them with electrical appliances and a car at the door, and this could be bought by the workers. Because we also had labor unions that became official and people could increase their incomes. We had the welfare state that allowed people to continue paying even if they lost their job, because the whole thing, so that people could buy houses and things. This was a momentous change, and of course it created enormous markets, and it was a completely different, the American way of life sort of thing. Now we have to reinvent the way of life, and that way of life is green. And green means, first of all, that the whole range of products that form the luxury life are not necessarily going to be physical possessions, but are going to be a healthy life, a fun life, a social life, and social both person to person and through the net. Because we already see what's happening. All the young people have a completely different way of approaching life from the only possession sort of notion, on the couch potato, you just sit and watch. This is no longer, they're not that. They're active, they're prosumers, they're doing their things, they're being creative, they're thinking of being entrepreneurs, not just employees. I mean, it's a whole world, and they also have a much more active lifestyle in general. And that possibility, united with durability of products. I mean, why aren't products durable? Why do we have this planned obsolescence? Because businesses needed to sell to the same people who had the money again and again and again. But imagine a different situation where instead of having to sell to the same person 5 refrigerators in their lifetime, you could make a fantastically beautiful refrigerator that will last for the whole lifetime, and you make 4 more for 4 more people. So that you don't need to, and actually it'll be not 4, but probably 25 more people. So the growth of markets will be thanks to the growth of global development and the incorporation of everybody into consumption through, and even having durability of the sort that you have refurbishment, and you plan for it. And therefore, every resource will last much more than it is lasting now. I mean, we are wasting materials, we're throwing them out, we could do much more with that. And innovation in that direction, the vast possibilities. If you think of what it would mean, if you think of the challenge of the emerging countries to the advanced countries, if it were possible to revamp the infrastructures, redesign all products, redesign all production methods to make them green, that would be almost the equivalent of the reconstruction of Europe and in terms of investment and employment. If you do refurbishment and maintenance, can you imagine the amount of jobs that just doing that would create? I mean, there's a whole range of things that we haven't even thought of because we are stuck in the old model. We were taught a way of consumption and a way of production and all that, which was great at the time. And it did provide, it's the biggest boom we've ever had. It was wonderful. But now it's an obstacle. So we've got to rethink our patterns of production, our patterns of consumption. And obviously in that whole range of changes, fiber to the home, and anything that has to do with universal access, affordable access for everybody in every country, everywhere, is almost a precondition. Because if people learn to work with internet as if it were electricity, just normal, just everyday, there'll be so much more innovation, all the skills that you need to work, all those things would be developed. So in fact, ICT, green growth, and full global development together can give us a global golden age.
Based on your knowledge of these previous revolutions, are you confident that we will crack it?
Not at all, unfortunately.
And what are the main, why not? What are the main stumbling blocks that you see?
Okay, one of the things you have to do in order to be able to switch from one way of acting to the other is that you have to make finance abandon the casino and move towards funding the real economy. Now, every single, the whole context is made to favor the casino. Everybody's thinking of regulation, so you have to have more money, but not, for instance, of taxing things that are in the casino and not taxing things that go to the real economy or many other. Of course, we can't discuss the details. But the first thing is that finance is going the wrong way, and there is nothing that's moving them in another direction, and they have so much power they can push against anything that would be a change. This, of course, means that government has to intervene. Government has to become active. And the ideology of the free market has gone so far. I mean, I've just said that the free market is very important in the first half, but it is an obstacle in the second. Actually, the free market, that unfettered free market, because you need the free market even if it's guided, but the unfettered, mad free market that's expected to do everything without touching is as obsolete today as in the 1970s, the state that does everything was obsolete. So in fact, we have to make this shift, but at that time, finance was strong and could impose it. Who's going to impose it now? And there isn't enough pressure from people. There isn't enough pressure on the politicians. The politicians are getting all the pressure from the finance world and very little pressure from the production world and from people to make the shift. Because it isn't just a shift to green, it's a shift to worrying about the whole of society, because we go from individualism to, again, the collective values and all that.
So it's a complete step change in our whole thinking.
It's what happened in after the Second World War. You actually had, everybody set up the welfare state. Everybody set up all these policies that were in favor of increasing incomes for the great majorities, because, of course, it was going to also be good for business. But during the 30s, when the New Deal proposals were being made, business was ferociously opposing it, saying it was communism. So, it was only because the war taught them how good it was to work with the state and how good it was to have all these enormous markets. Of course, they had the soldiers as market for a moment. But then when they went back, there were two very good things. One, that they had had that sort of dress rehearsal of what it was like to work with and for government and all that. But the other is that the women who worked in the factories knew how to work with machines. So when they wanted to sell them washing machines, oh, great, they knew how to do it, So they also had this. So there were many conditions. Also that people had been together, the rich and the poor and all that, so some of the tensions had been broken. But right now we have a very divisive society, and I don't know. But I think I have one reason why I think it's going to happen, and it's a reason that one wouldn't expect. It is that because of the pattern that globalization has taken now, and because of the growth of the emerging markets and all this thing, the prices of energy and of materials are necessarily going to go up. And that will mean not only the prices of energy and materials themselves, and the products, but also cardboard and plastic, which are the things with which faraway products are wrapped. And that is pure energy. I mean, plastic is just petrochemicals, and cardboard is made with enormous amounts of energy. So all that, the products and the transport and everything is going to go up. On the other hand, climate change is probably going to bring a lot of catastrophes. So risks are going to rise, insurance costs are going to rise. With that, the whole relationship of prices will change. The cheap labor far away is not going to be as cheap. The products that contain a lot of material and a lot of energy are not going to be as cheap. And therefore, you have transport, energy, all these things will count in a different way. And therefore, you will have changes in strategies of both business and government, and relocation of some facilities, and changes in consumption patterns, because people will also feel the pinch, companies will feel the pinch. So it's prices. Isn't that sad that we have to wait until the planet and the supply and demand bring us to the wall before we can think of what's actually happening and guide things in a different direction? So I do hope we get there by conviction rather than being pushed by a sick planet, but it's not about saving the planet, actually. It's about saving the economy.
Well, let's hope you're right, and thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you for inviting me.